thank you for joining us on today's webinar. My name is Bethany and I'm the Relationship and Engagement Manager here at UMI, and today I'm joined by my colleague Jamie from the EM3 Growth Hub. Before we dive in, if you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the Q&A chat box in your Zoom control panel and we'll try and answer them as we go. So Jamie, could you introduce yourself and what the Growth Hub is all about?
Yeah, sure. Good morning, everybody. My name's Jamie. I'm currently overseeing the Enterprise M3 Growth Hub. I'm also the Partnership Director for UMI. So basically just to talk about the Growth Hub a little bit and just give you a bit of background information on the Growth Hub in case you're new and don't really know who we are. So we're a fully funded business support service providing advice, coaching, webinars and signposting to small, medium enterprises across the Enterprise M3 region. So our mission really is to help businesses recover, adapt and develop sustainable growth, particularly after COVID, and to become more productive and profitable overall. All businesses at any stage of their development can actually access and benefit from the Enterprise M3 Growth Hub services, including the information bank that we have, the resource network, and the business support helpline that we also have access to. Additionally, there are specialist growth advice targeted at businesses operating within the key sectors, and it's a free personal service for businesses associated with the Enterprise M3 key sectors, and it aims to connect businesses with experts to help their growth plans really overall. Now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce my colleague at the Growth Hub, Paul. If you're there, if you could unmute and show your video.
I am. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you doing?
Yeah, very good. You can see me all right, can you?
Yeah, I got you.
Technology works. Wonderful. Okay, I'll kick off then. I'll just try and just get my screen onto that. Hopefully everybody can see that. My name, first of all, as Jamie says, is Paul Scott. I'm a permanent growth champion at the Growth Hub. At the Enterprise M3 Growth Hub. I come from a background in business. I've been in business for the best part of 40 years, the last 25 of which have been spent at board level. I grew my own business with a couple of colleagues in 2004. We started a recruitment business and we grew that right the way through the recession, in fact, in 2007 and 2008, to become a £120 million operation. I sold my shares and exited the business in 2014. At that age, I wanted to try and do something I really enjoyed. I became a growth coach on the Growth Accelerator program, helping other businesses, and that led me to join the Growth Hub as an associate in 2017. And I joined as a permanent growth champion in March 2018. I've got to say, it's what I enjoy doing. Sorry, I've gone back to the content. Okay, today I'm going to talk about business development generally. I'd like to define business development because some people call it, sorry, it's being pressed. Some people call it business development, some people call it sales. Business development to me is both sales, but it's also the development of the business. So it's all the things that go behind the sales that make the sales. So we're going to be talking about that. We're obviously going to be talking about COVID and what's actually happened and how it's affected your business. I'm going to talk a little bit about pivoting because it's the word of the month. I'm going to look at some it's easy for me to say, diversification tools.
Paul, just quickly, do you mind just, are you sharing your screen?
I thought I was, but I may not be. Just bear with me 2 seconds. Technical error. All right. How's that? Can everybody see that?
Not on this end.
No, I can't see it.
Right, bear with me again. Okay.
Yeah.
There we are.
Right, are we done now? Are we good?
Yeah.
Good. It was only my introduction you missed, and there's no slides for that, so you haven't missed anything. Just going through again the content, talking about pivoting. It's the key word of the month. and we'll look at a couple of diversification tools that may help you. I then want to go and talk about general sales, talk about the sales funnel, defining your target market. More importantly, down the line, a little bit about the psychology of selling as well. So hopefully everybody will have something to take away from this, but we'll see how we go. For some reason, my buttons won't move. There we go. That's right. They're working now. Sorry, technology and myself. Obviously, I'm in sales. Technology doesn't come into my skill set. Okay, so what's COVID done exactly? It's changed the world. That's an understatement. There's a big increase in remote working, online shopping. Businesses are having to change and pivot. Social changing habits. We've all changed. We've got social distancing. More importantly, markets have moved. Some of them changed. Some of them disappeared. Some of them disappeared altogether. Some will reappear. Some won't. Some are already there, but in a different structure.
Well, just quickly on that one, do you think it's just sped up really what's actually was gonna happen anyway?
I think so. I think that's a fair assessment. I think, you know, that there was a veering away from the high streets onto online. There was a resistance also from companies who didn't want to let home working happen, because there was this thing called presenteeism. So you're actually doing a job as long as you were there, i.e. your face was in the office. And that's moved a little bit to now based on people working on outputs and you know what they actually produce. So I think it's forced that in a way. It's just a little bit uncomfortable, I think. I think good businesses that are thriving, that were setting the world alight, they pivoted regularly. They examined what they were doing. They examined new markets. They were actually they look at themselves all the time. What this has meant is that everybody's got to do that, unfortunately, because everybody's got to do it rather than just for improvement purposes. People have actually got to do it to survive. So it's more urgent, and it's very uncomfortable, unfortunately, for some. But yes, I agree, Jamie. It's just sped it up. There's an argument as to who actually invented this. Some people say it was Darwin or said this in the first place, but it's not the strongest of species that survives, nor the most intelligent. It's the ones that are most adaptable to change, and that is so true, and never been more true than today. So firstly, the first thing to do when we're looking at change and pivoting is actually assessing your own position as your company. Has your market suddenly moved or disappeared? Sounds an obvious question, because you'll know, because your revenue's disappeared. But is it permanent? Will it come back? And if it is going to come back, what time frame? Very difficult question, because nobody knows about, obviously the news on the vaccine was very good yesterday, but still nobody knows exactly when it's come back. So can you pivot? And pivoting is a great idea anyway. Businesses should be looking at what they do and assessing their own position and what markets, and improving the business anyway. So it's a good idea. But what is the word pivot? To quote from a dictionary, to modify whilst retaining some continuity with its previous version. So, i.e. the startup was able to pivot the app to a new market without losing too many man-hours of coding, which is a definition of the word pivot. So it is a form of diversification. How do you make those decisions? How do you actually decide where to pivot, how to pivot, what to pivot to? That's what we're going to look at next. And I'm going to start with a thing called the Ansoff matrix. It's very old. It's basically 4 strategies to help firms grow and analyze the risks associated with each. It dates back to 1957, which is really comforting, because I'm working with something that's actually older than me, and it was invented by Igor Ansoff and published in the Harvard Business Review back in 1957. What is it? Okay, it's a matrix of 4 boxes basically. And if we look down the left, we've got new markets and existing markets. Across the top, you've got existing products and new products, and you've got the 2 lines of increasing risk, which the risk increases the further away from the home market that you get, so to the bottom right-hand corner. Let's look at the 4 boxes and what they mean. Market penetration, the top left one is the safest and easiest. And what it is means it's actually putting existing products into existing markets. So it's taking actions like decreasing prices to gain more market share, increasing niche penetration, increasing your marketing, taking competitive advantage over your competitors and market share from your competitors. It's doing what you already do, but better. Moving across to the right, product development. That's new products into existing markets. So you've got your existing market and you're going to develop a new product and put it into that market. Again, the risk is slightly higher than having market penetration. Bottom left, market development. That's entering new markets with existing products. Again, it's a bit more risk, but it's the other way around to the product development. And then the bottom right corner, which is entering a new product in a new market. And this is very akin to startup dynamics of a startup, because you've got a new product into a whole new market. Potentially, though, that gives you the biggest gain because you're actually adding a whole new product to a whole new market. Looking at what this looks like maybe in actual terms, this normally comes after a brainstorm. So you would have a brainstorm, get all your ideas out down on a storyboard or on a piece of paper, and then you would start classifying them. We'll have a look at what that looks like. Again, without the graphics, it's existing products, new products, market development, etc. All in their own boxes. Just to give you an example of market development, that's the bottom left, which is existing products into new markets. To give you an example of that, both Nike, if you want to call it that, and Adidas took their existing products into the Chinese market. They expanded, and that is a prime example. Lucozade also, they started off as a drink for the old and infirm. That's what they were famous for, and they took that product and they took it into they made it a sports related product. So they actually pivoted and put it into say the sports related, made it a sports related product. Diversification, you can mitigate the risk because you can have related and unrelated pure diversification. I think it can be mitigated. These are just a couple of the tools. If you don't want to do, this is the Harvard-based one, and it's quite, you can plot your business ideas wherever they fall in those squares, and you can even go higher and actually mark them actually inside the squares. If you want to simplify it, something I've used in my business and also as a growth coach is a very simple homemade scoring matrix, which is probably just as effective. For me, it worked just as well. As I've used it successfully in my own businesses and with clients. And this is just a homemade on Excel. And I've listed, after a brainstorm again, I've listed the products down the left-hand side. I've called them product A, B, C, and product A for ease. And then I've marked them out of 5 on each point. So ease of entry, how easy is it to get into the market? What's the development time? Is it hard? It gets a 1. If it's easy, it gets a 5. Speed of return on investment and how much the pounds or the volume of return on investment, and also how does it fit in with our existing skill sets we already have in the business. Really, really important. So I've scored those across, and as you can see on this one, it is a fictitious one, but product A 31153, I scored it. Product market B, to move into market B, got 55435. Way out ahead, 22, and you end up with a scoring matrix. It doesn't make your decision for you, but it gives you clarity on your thinking process into how that might work, and it also makes you examine what the pros and cons are. It makes you ask the question behind your decisions. There's also lots of other tools. There's a thing called the orbit chart where I'm not going to go through them all because there's too many. The orbit chart is really also very useful, which plots your business growth. It gives you a picture of what you may look like in 5 years' time across all the axes of the business. That's, you know, your turnover, your gross margin, your revenue per head, the number of staff you'll need, etc. A really, really, really useful tool. So that's a couple of tools to say that the simple matrix I would recommend, because it's very easy to do, and you just need a preceding brainstorm. Okay, moving on to the next section, I wanted to talk about the sales engine. I call it that because it is an engine. It's actually essential to any business. It's at the heart of any business, and without it, you won't succeed. You need to sell. The business needs revenue, and there are procedures that some of these may seem obvious, but you'll be surprised at the number of people who don't actually do them before they actually launch themselves into a market or a new market. Before you begin, you have to know your product and your service. You have to have, you should know your USPs. What are your competitive advantages? Secondly, you've got to identify a need. If there is no need for your product or service, don't do it. Nobody will buy it because there is no need. So you have to clarify and make sure there is a need. Once you've done that, you identify the target market, the size and structure of the company that you're looking to, or it could be, if it's B2C, the structure and the demographics of the people that you're trying to reach. You look at the entry points and the geography, and you identify the routes into that market and look specifically at who is the decision maker in those markets.
Oh, just a quick one on that.
Yeah.
Because obviously, with a lot of companies, they'd have developed their product or service in order to address a particular need in the marketplace.
Yes.
And in that sense, where would you sort of recommend that a company would actually start this type of process if they know roughly what their market is? Is there a, once they've got the ball rolling, they may have established themselves. If we take it away from a startup and looking at established businesses, where would you say that they would start on this journey, or do it all at once?
No, it is a structured journey, which again, as a business coach, I help people through. But it's starting with identifying the target market. So you have to look at what you're doing, your product, where is it going to fit, who are you competing with? If you're competing against Serco and Capita and those people business, are you actually going to go after that market? Because it's a tender-driven market. You've got to have ISO 9012 tick boxes. Or are you selling on your niche market? In this day and age, businesses, I think, are either niche or they're big. And the niche businesses sell on value. They sell on their self, people by people. So you're selling yourself. You're selling the value of what you do rather than competing on a mass market. Yeah, so identifying the type of target that you're going to defines your methods.
I'm guessing in summary of what you're saying as well, what would help a business is that they can focus their time and money on the areas or people or market that's going to yield the most results. So rather than wasting money on a scattergun approach, it's really zeroing in into that specific market so you get the biggest return on your investment of time or money.
Absolutely, and I'm going to talk about that again in a little while. Just measuring what you're actually doing all the time, constantly measuring it, because you need to know what returns you're getting on your sales channels, which we'll talk about in a minute. So absolutely, Jamie, I agree. Okay, on the process, as Jamie alluded to, it's a process, not an event, and the sales funnel really is divided up into all these sections till the actual sales come out the bottom and the revenue comes out the bottom. And it's suffice to say that each one of these needs constant monitoring. So your awareness phase is your initial marketing, making people aware of what you do and where you are. The interest phase, which is where prospects demonstrate an interest in what you're doing, and then they probably do some product research or service research. Then they go into the evaluation phase, which is where prospects and companies examine your competitors and line you up against your value proposition. Then you go into the decision phase, the purchase phase, and down at the bottom, the re-evaluation phase, which is after you've done the sale, you've got the contract or whatever it is. You need to constantly measure your performance in that, because at one point they will repurchase or it will come up for renewal. So it's a constant process. I'll talk about a different funnel in a minute as well, which is funnel seems to be the flavor of the week. So it's a process, not a single event. Make sure that the top of the funnel is fed. And for that, we're just talking about it, Jamie, using a multi-channel approach. It's not just one thing is not gonna make your sales good. You're not just going to do it on LinkedIn. You're not just going to do it by mailing people. It's got to be a whole multi-channel approach. And differentiate between direct and indirect marketing and sales. A lot of people make the mistake of only doing stuff that's going to give them an instant response. That's the direct stuff. So you're actually selling your product online. Don't forget about the indirect stuff, which is useful, the awareness marketing, which gets your name around. You can't measure that so easily. It's quite difficult to measure, but don't stop doing it because it's not giving instant results. So use qualification tools where you can. I'll talk about those again in a minute. Some interesting channels, but it's also very important not to have preconceived ideas of whether these work or not. There is science behind all of them. So some of the channels I put on the screen there, on the left, they tend to be generally direct, but they can be indirect. And on the right, a lot of the indirect ones, where if you speak at an event, you really don't know, you're not going to get a direct response from that. You might do, but you should have, follow up with all the speakers and try and turn it into direct sales or direct marketing. But those are all different, and that's not a definitive list. There's lots of other ones in between there. But my point is, don't have because I was guilty of this, have a preconceived idea of whether they're good or not, purely on your own experience from the other end. I'm just going to take direct mail, where when I started my own consultancy after I left my business, I went in and my impression of direct mail was actually, it doesn't work because I get it through all the time on my email. Delete. It's a waste of time, right? Wrong. I had somebody actually talk to me, a business coach. As it happened, I got a business coach to help me be a business coach, and he explained the actual science behind direct mail, which changed my opinion of it. If you've defined your client market, let's just hypothesize for a minute. If you've defined your client market to say, let's take a figure of 3,000 businesses within my area that could be interested in my service this week. How do I find those people? How do I get to them? I'm not going to phone 3,000 people in a week. The facts are that only a very, very small percentage of those 3,000 people will actually be wanting to talk to you or have a need for your services at that point, because it's not in the rest of them, it's not in their top 4 or 5 priorities that week. They've got other things to think about. So I was in recruitment, for instance. If you phoned a client and he didn't have any staffing problems, didn't need recruitment, it wasn't on his top 5 priorities, he didn't want to speak to me. Quite rightly too. Why would he? So the process behind direct mail is actually, it acts as a filter. So if you're emailing your 3,000 client base, the open rate roughly normally I think is about 20%. That's all. And the response rate is much more, the actual people who actually open the email several times and click through to your website is even smaller. It's 1% or under. Okay, but that's 30. Is that 1% of 3,000 is 30? You can do the maths. But at the bottom, with these modern platforms, email platforms, they give you who's opened it, when they've opened it, how many times they've opened it, whether they've clicked through to your website, etc. And they send you a list, or you can access a list of the top 5. So people who've opened it 10 times. I had one person opened it 17 times when I first started doing it, and I called him because what the filter did was actually show me that became from a cold lead to a warm lead, because I knew to open it 17 times he was probably interested, and it works. Don't worry about the 2,995 who've deleted. They don't matter in a sense, and you keep the different hooks going every month, and it pops out 5 warm leads at the end of every warm leads at the end of every month. Now, I didn't understand that because I was on the other end of it, and I was one of the people who deleted, but that person found his clients somewhere. So what I'm saying is don't poo-poo any of them before you actually understand the science behind them and what they actually do. Currently, I have an issue with LinkedIn. I can't see it. I need help with LinkedIn, because there are LinkedIn gurus who make it work. All I've seen is these people emailing me and reaching out and doing all the things, but I don't answer any of them. But I'm sure there is a logic behind it. So don't poo-poo any of them. Ask the experts.
Paul, just quickly on that as well, because I totally agree, and I think sometimes it's choosing the right tool for the right job. And would you, because there's a lot of information there, and as you quite rightly said, that doesn't even cover all of them, all the opportunities. So would you recommend that people go at it, belt and braces and attack all of them, or have a more curated approach?
I think you need to build a sales and marketing plan. I think you need to assess what your market is and what the entry points are, and then look at the best way to get to them. It may not be that LinkedIn or direct mail is right for them, or speaking events is right for them. I think to brainstorm it along with after you've done your diversification strategy, then to look at how you get to the market and how you can and the best methods to use. And again, if you want to be scientific about it, you can actually do a scoring matrix. So you could actually list all the ideas and give them a score of how you think they're going to respond, what sort of response rate you're going to get, how easy it is to do, the cost of it, etc. So you could do that. But planning. Sorry to keep on about it. If you plan, the more you plan, the better it comes out at the end.
Well, I guess what you're saying again is that once you've identified your target market, it's kind of analysing what channels do they exist in, and then you use that appropriate channel to match. So you're talking in their language, essentially.
Absolutely, and looking at particular demographics, and that has a lot to do. I'm not a branding expert, but branding. If you're looking to your target market is 35 years plus, single ladies or whatever it is, you need to get your marketing, your branding based around that demographic and what's going to appeal to them. So there's a lot more to it, but plan and plan again.
Yeah.
Okay. Good. Excuse me. I'm going to now just switch to a little bit about the psychology of selling, because it's really important. We're all selling, whether you think you're a salesperson or not. Everybody's selling almost every day of their life, whether it's looking to get your child to eat greens or go to bed on time, or you're looking to persuade your partner to buy a new car or change the car or buy a sports car, even better. You are selling. You're trying to persuade people to your way of thinking. So you are selling. And the psychology of selling is influenced mainly by the person's positivity. And I'm mentioning this because we're living in a very negative year, as far as I'm concerned. As far as everybody's concerned, we are surrounded by negatives. This is a very old slide. I've seen it. I think I saw it when I was 18. Somebody put it up. Is the glass half full or half empty? And it's a way of looking at a problem. It's either doom or gloom, or we're halfway to the top. My actual answer is, the question is it refillable? Which is probably a different take on it. But I'm going to start with attitude, because, as I said, everybody's surrounded by negatives, whether you yourself are selling or you have a sales team within your business. You're surrounded. You just got to listen to the news. You've got to listen to the radio. It's negatives. It's bad news. It's people dying, and it's not good. So people are surrounded by negatives, and your state of mind is the biggest factor in your success in life, but particularly in business and particularly in selling. You have to focus on the positives. I'll give you some stats behind that in the next couple of slides, but just a couple of little things that maybe you can take away. And I thought, we use them in our business, and I didn't think they were very good at the start, but I actually learned that they were really, really psychologically were great. Just writing, getting everybody, you can do it, or get everybody in your staff just to list things that they've achieved in that day. Just write them down, all the positive things, because they take it home, because it's very easy to get a client complain and people focus on it and they get down and they get depressed. And just write the things down that you have achieved in that day. Have a meeting with all your staff, with your sales team on a Friday. Talk about their positives. Get them to talk about their positive. List the top 5 positives in their week. give them a round of applause, and send them home for the weekend with positive thoughts. Seems not very much, but I can promise you it's really, really important, particularly in these times. And the reasons it's important is when they come back into work and when they're actually doing their sales job, what clients actually hear, what they actually hear is made up of different elements. It's not actually the spoken word. So what a client hears is 7% is made up about what you actually say, so the words you actually say. 38%, this is in a meeting by the way, 38% is made up of voice or the tone in which you say it, and 55% is made up of body language. That changes on the telephone call to something like 70-30, in favour 30% being the spoken word and 70% being the tone of which it's delivered. Now, if you're in a negative mood or a negative brain space, what you say, you can say the same words, but they come across really differently, and they're not heard in the same way at all by the client. And somewhere in between there is the video conferencing, which has taken over obviously from face-to-face meetings, and it's very much more towards the meeting percentages, but I don't think it's as much on body language, but it is very important.
I was going to say, Paul, actually on that as well, given the current sort of climate, that I'd be interested in your opinion on some of the challenges. Do you think now, given that most meetings are held virtually, and some considerations that businesses may want to undertake?
Absolutely. I think it's changed a lot of business. I think it's reduced a lot of costs because people don't have to travel. And I think I think there was an element, a big wave of Zoomitis, where people got really tired of it because it was new and you do have to concentrate. It's a different concentration skills on a video call than in meetings. You have to work much harder to keep the engagement of the client, particularly if you're selling something. Sorry, what was your question again, Jamie?
No, just some of the challenges. So, for instance, I even noticed it myself that where we could, say, attend events and you'd have opportunistic encounters with people where you could get business or develop business. So some of these seem to be getting missed a little bit through this virtual world, and it's just understanding like what your thoughts are on that. Is there any ways in which a business could say, right, how could you increase the value of these virtual interactions?
I think you're absolutely right, and even in my job as growth or ambassador for the Growth Hub, I used to get a lot of businesses come onto the Growth Hub through attending networking meetings, and the reason is that you could actually have a one-to-one in a networking situation in a room, and you have a chance to close in sales terms that or create that engagement and that engagement, if you like, with the client. On a conference call, even on Zoom, you don't get an opportunity to do that. You can't close. So that means that the follow-up elements are much more important. So if you've got a Zoom, you go on a Zoom call, you have a list of attendees, you have to then do your engagement afterwards, much more difficult. So you are then following up, but make sure you follow up. A lot of people just don't follow up. They just do the Zoom meeting and then.
Yeah, that's a really good point, actually, that follow-up bit, because like you say, if you're in a meeting with 16, you may never get a chance to speak to someone, and if they're saying something that resonates with you, following up's crucial at that point, right?
Absolutely, I absolutely agree. I just also want to look at on my tact of being positive and positivity. The positive thing about Zoom, having from a lot of clients feedback that their client relationships have actually got better, because instead of a phone call from office to office with their client, they're now doing a Zoom call home to home, and the actual engagement and the relationship between those clients has moved on to a different level. So that's a positive. I'm trying to look for all the positives in this world. That is a positive. If you look at it, we should be championing that. As it happens, you've done a fantastic segue into my next thing, which is I just thought I'd put down the five best tips for preparing for video calls. So I just jotted them down of what I thought they were. The power pose, I'm going to transcribe that into, if you've got a really important thing to do, then maybe a nice piece of music or a piece of motivating music to put your mind in the right space to actually do the call. Make sure you sit up straight and fill the screen. Engagement is really much harder on a video call than it is face to face. So make sure you're looking at the camera. I did when I started doing lots of video calls. I was around the room like this because, you know, I was distracted, and it's really, really off-putting. So smile and look at the camera, and use your arms for gestures. Unfortunately, my camera's a bit high to use my arms, but use your arms for gestures because it creates engagement. And do avoid nervous twitching and scratching your chin and talking through your hands. The number of people I see that, or slumping back in the chair like that, it just creates disinterest. And I hope you weren't just too disinterested then. The biggest thing, the biggest danger, I think, of video calls is actually when we go back out into the street and we get off Zoom, please don't forget to take your Zoom suit off, because it can cause a lot of embarrassment. Just my bit of fun. Okay, back to basics, and again, this is going back to basics. But again, a lot of people forget. When I was a young salesman and I was lucky enough to get in front of a client, I used to just spurt out my sales pitch and said, "We were good at this, we're great at that, we do this, it's fantastic." And then somebody got hold of me and said, "Look, we're into fourth generation sales now. Please make sure you find the client's pain, establish what they're buying for, why do they need it, what's it going to solve for them, and I always make a top 3 list of what their pain points are." But to do that, you need to listen. My favorite picture of a dog: you've got 2 ears and only 1 mouth. I use them proportionately. So listen twice as much as you speak. So what you're trying to do is let the client define the target for you, and then you hit it. I think, as a reminder, I use the consult and prescribe scenario. If you were a patient, you went to a doctor and you sat in front of the doctor, and as soon as you sat down, he said, "Mr. Scott, do come in. Thank you. Sit down. I've got fantastic aspirins, and our antibiotics are the best in the world, and we do some great leg braces. Our massage kit is fantastic. What would you like?" That's not the way to sell. Consult and prescribe. The doctor will actually. You'll talk twice as much as the doctor will. He will ask you open questions about what the pain is, where it is, how it feels, etc. And then he will prescribe a specific remedy. And if you can do that, I think that's a real key factor in making sales work. And it's a mistake that lots of people do. They go into their sales pitch before they know what the actual target or the pain they're gonna heal is. So moving on to probably my last slide, which is another just a generalization really, and it's not set in stone by any means, but you have to also consider who you are selling to and what their drivers may be. And these are just generalizations. They don't fit every scenario. But if you are selling to a chief financial officer or purchasing or procurement, their order of priorities are probably cost saving, process and compliance, followed by quality and performance, probably. If you're selling to line management or the MD or somebody who is actually doing the work, their probably order is going to be quality and performance first, followed by cost, followed by process and compliance, because their job is to get the job done. And of course, likewise, HR and compliance, process and compliance is obviously first, followed by quality, probably followed by cost. Not set in stone, but when you're talking to people, just keep it makes you just examine where they're coming from and what their buying signals are.
Well, Paul, just quickly on this one, because I know earlier on we talked about identifying target markets and how we actually get to that sort of market penetration phase. Can you see any sort of inherent issues with actually getting direct access to these individuals? And if so, have you got any tips in order to overcome that?
Yes, I think you are right. They're called gatekeepers in salesperson's language. To get past a gatekeeper to a decision maker is quite often very, very difficult. My tips, one is never sell to the gatekeeper. Never actually try and convince her why you want to speak to the person, because, or her or him, sorry, they won't understand. They don't make the decision makers. They don't really care what you're selling. Their job is to just stop you getting through. So never try and sell to the gatekeeper. I've got to say, when I was doing sales, I used to bypass the gatekeeper wherever I could. I used to phone at 8 o'clock in the morning when the MD was in, but the gatekeeper wasn't. Out of hours, try and get their mobile number. There's loads of other more probably slightly inventive ways of getting through, but yeah, it is a problem. There's a whole, I'm not going to go on too long, there's a whole training session that people can have on it about that, and also handling objections, which is another great sales skill, handling objections.
Yeah, that's brilliant. That's really useful.
And that really is I don't know how I've been doing for time, but that's about my slides. I'm just going to summarize really just the main points. I hope people have just got something to take away from this, even if it's only a small thing. So just a top line view of some of the topics. Make sure you define your market, make sure you confirm your need or the need it resists. Research, plan. Strategy is always good. And I'm going to reinvent or reiterate my point that good businesses do this anyway. They're doing this all the time. They're flying, but they're still doing a strategy meeting every 6 months to look at where they can go next. Now everybody's got to do it. So that's my webinar, I think.
Thank you, Paul. Honestly, that was really, really interesting. I think there's quite a lot to take away there. And we've got this webinar recorded as well. So if you wanted to review it, by all means, you can via our UMI YouTube channel, I believe, and also the EM3 YouTube channel, but someone will correct me if I'm wrong there. We've got a little bit of time actually for some questions. So I'm going to hand over to Beth, who can pick those up.
Yeah, so we've had one come through, which is, what channels are most effective during COVID?
Wow. I think, is that for me?
Yes.
But from experience talking to clients, there's no one channel. I've got to say that the whole shift has been towards digital and online businesses. And I'll go so far as to say, if you're in business and you're not online, you need to be. Whatever you do, you need an online presence. If you're in the hospitality industry, you need a booking system online. Nobody wants to phone up anymore. They're all doing it online. For takeaways now, of course, with the new legislation, you have to pre-book or your takeaway service. So an online presence for ordering is really, really important. And so anything online, and if you're not online, do it. That's
I think the other thing, just to add to that, Paul, as well, is that you don't have to do it all yourself. And I know sometimes you'll look at it and it's the Wild West really when it comes to what software packages that you want to use for what purpose. But essentially there are people out there that will support that journey and do a lot of the heavy lifting for you.
I absolutely agree. I've got to say that my view on it is bring experts in to experts. I mean, I'm a growth coach, but I'm not a digital marketeer. And with businesses, I would recommend them actually get an expert in, because it's a dark art. I call it a dark art. That's not an insult to it. There's a lot that I don't know about it. And I'm of the view that it's the same as getting stuff done on your house. If you want plastering done, get a plasterer. Don't get a chippy to do the plastering. No offence to chippies, but you'll get a better job done with a plasterer. So get an expert that knows what they're doing, because it's each of those worlds is a whole world on its own.
Definitely. We've just had another question come through, which is, the phrase pivot has been used quite a lot recently during COVID-19. What is your view on the refinement of businesses' established marketing strategies and route to market for the next 6 to 9 months?
Sorry, can you repeat the last bit of that? What is businesses?
What is your view on the refinement of a business established marketing strategies and route to market for the next 6 to 9 months?
the strategy is to examine it exactly as I've said in the thing. I can't give a blanket answer because every business is fundamentally different. Their markets are different. They have different drivers, characteristics, and they've been affected differently. So the first thing is, going back to my first slides, is how's your business been affected? Is it going to come back? I dealt with a recently at the Growth Hub, a company based near Heathrow Airport whose main business was ferrying or picking up high level business executives from the airport and take them to the office. Now their market's moved, and I'm not sure it's going to come back, because certainly not to the extent that they've had to. So they've had to actually expand their business out and look at other routes to market. Still in the main taxiing business, but they've had to look at other business because their market's not going to come back. So it's really assessing where your market is and where it's gone and what you can add to it.
Well, I think that just to build on that as well, actually, which is worth looking at, is the concept around a customer avatar, and to actually spend a bit of time, going through all the sort of what your end user or customer actually looks like. Where do they shop? Where do they look for particular, what publications do they read, etc. And going quite into the granular detail of what that individual is, what they're like, what their characteristics are, and then you can build a lot of the focus strategies and channels that you'd want to use according to that.
Absolutely. And the same that's B2C, and B2B is the same process, but with companies. You're looking at the size, the structure, and what they're doing, and have they moved? Have your clients moved? Because their market might have moved, and you can move with it, or maybe. So yeah.
Right. And one more, I've had a niche business which has been successful, but competitors are now offering similar products for free. Now looking at swiveling to work on my passions, which are in connection with mental health, training and support and disability issues. Should my energies be directed towards crowdfunding? If so, any tips?
Crowdfunding. I think as a Growth Hub growth coach, we have specialists for crowdfunding, because crowdfunding is the question was, should your energies be directed at crowdfunding? If you want to grow and compete, then yes, you've got to look at all channels. Crowdfunding is a little bit quirky, and in my experience, it's very much favours the community type projects. So they tend to be funded by their own community, whether it's an interest community or a geographical community. But there are key tips, and again, I'm not a person expert in crowdfunding, but there are key issues I know with, or key techniques to get the story out there to the industry. As far as the actual question is concerned, I can't answer you exactly, because I don't know what the competitors are doing, how big they are, whether it's just are they just looking to get into your market or take market share, or are they there to stay? Has your market have you got margin erosion, which is what we had in recruitment, where the big boys came in, the capitals came in and did it at half the cost we could do it for, just to buy the business.
I think also, Paul, just quickly, your Ansoff matrix earlier on is probably a good position for this as well, so that if you've got that existing product, even though you've got new entrants to that marketplace and the barriers to access are low, could you use that model in a different market, or could you expand on that a little bit more, or look at your market, your target market, and is there an additional identified gap?
Yes, I mean, you've got to look at everything, and the Ansoff matrix actually forces you to ask those questions. It could be that if you're not selling on price originally, you're selling on value, i.e. you're selling you or your service or the niche value of that service, then I wouldn't, just as a general comment, I wouldn't go and try and compete with the mass market, because you haven't got the infrastructure. You can't compete with them. You've got to improve your own value proposition and continue selling on the basis of the proposition that you've been selling on. So continue the value proposition. You're not big enough to compete with the big boys.
Yeah, I think the value proposition is a really good point as well, because I think you mentioned it earlier on as well, that often people buy from people. And you know, if that's part of your value, then it's as much yourself that's being sold as much as it is the product or service in many cases.
If you're selling on value, I agree with you. People not sometimes, always buy. If you're selling on your service and you're providing it, etc., for the smaller businesses, if you're in the large tender market, then not so much so. But it still exists. People still buy from people even in that market.
Because then it goes into that trust and building up that trust dividend, and it's much easier to make transactions when there's a strong trust element in there. Absolutely.
Yeah, trusted advisor is a great phrase from a position of selling. If you get your client and you become a trusted advisor to them rather than somebody just selling them a product, then that's a great place to be. That's where everybody should be aiming for, in my view, unless you're in the commodity market and you're just turning contracts over.
Great. Well, that brings us to the end of today's session. So thank you, Paul, for joining us today. It's been great having you on. And thank you to our audience for watching. If you did want to go back and rewatch any of today's webinar, it'll be up on the EM3 Growth Hub YouTube channel, alongside with our other previous webinars. So thank you very much, and we'll see you next time.
Cheers. Thank you.
Bye.